Yesterday we bid farewell to Seneca and to his mother. Today we hear more from Luke, who says, "Now then, when a light breeze sprang up from the south, opening a possible passage from Fair Havens to Phoenix, some 80 miles farther up the coast, the captain and the owner of the ship believed that they had obtained their purpose. Therefore they weighed anchor and sailed along Crete, close inshore. But suddenly a tempestuous wind, the violent nor'easter, struck down from the land, catching the ship and turning it out to sea. We gave way. We furled the sails and were driven 20 miles south till we came under the lee of a small island called Clauda. There we managed, but with all hands and all our strength, to haul the ship's shore boat and to secure it on deck. We ran cables under the ship to keep the timbers from splitting apart, and because we feared to run on the Syrtis, the sandbanks of North Africa, the sailors lowered the mainsail and threw out sheet anchors to slow us, and still we were driven. The next day brought no relief. So violently did the storm batter us that the sailors began to heave cargo overboard. On the third day, they cast out the ship's rigging, bearing all its poles to the wind. And when neither the sun nor the stars appeared for many a day, when we could no longer sight a position, when no small winter tempest lay unabating upon us, we finally abandoned any hope that we would be saved. It was then that Paul came forward and said, 'Men, you should have listened to me. You should never have set sail from Crete into this injury and loss. But I beg you now, take heart. And I promise you, none of your lives will be lost. Only the ship will be lost. For this very night, the God I worship, the God to whom I belong, sent an angel to me saying, Paul, don't be afraid. You must stand before Caesar. And lo, God has granted you all those who sail with you. So take heart, men, for I have faith in God that it will be exactly as he said to me. But, said Paul, we must run upon some island. During the 14th night, as we were drifting across the Sea of Adria about midnight, the sailors sensed that they were approaching land. So they sounded and found 20 fathoms. A little farther on, they sounded again and found 15 fathoms. And fearing that we might strike the rocks, they let out 4 anchors astern and prayed for daylight. Now, the sailors, saying they wanted to lay anchors out from the bow as well, lowered the shore boat into the sea. But Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, unless these men stay here, you can't be saved. The sailors were planning their private escape. Immediately, the soldiers cut loose the shore boat and let it go. Near dawn, Paul spoke to everyone, urging them to eat something. This is the 14th day of our anxiety, he said, and in the 14th day of a seasick fast, I beg you all to eat. It'll give you the strength that you'll need for the morning, since not a hair of your head shall perish. And when he had said this, he took bread and, in the presence of everyone, gave thanks to God and broke it and began to eat. Watching him, the others were encouraged and began to eat some food themselves. Altogether, we were 276 souls on board, and when they had all eaten their fill, they lightened the ship by throwing out all the rest of the wheat into the sea. When daylight came, no one recognized the land that lay before them, but they saw a bay with a beach, and they planned, if possible, to drive the ship aground in that place. So they cast off the 4 anchors astern, leaving them in the sea. They loosened the ropes that had lashed the rudders. They raised the foresail into the wind, and the wind blew the ship suddenly sharply toward the beach. But it struck a shoal. The vessel ran hard on a sandbank where the bow stuck fast while the great sea breakers banged behind us, smashing the back of the ship. "Kill the prisoners," the soldiers cried. "Don't let them escape." But the centurion wished to save Paul and forbade them. "Let those who can swim," he shouted, "jump first and make for shore. Those who can't, grab planks and boards, grab pieces of ship and save yourselves." And so it was that all escaped to land. After we had escaped, we learned that the island was called Malta. The natives who found us on shore showed an unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire in the rain and the cold, and they welcomed us all. Paul gathered a bundle of sticks, then reached to put them on the fire, but the heat drove a viper out, and it fastened on Paul's hand. When the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, they said, "The man's a murderer. He escaped the sea, but he won't escape justice. The killer is going to be killed." Paul reached over the flames and shook the creature off. The natives waited, expecting him to swell up or fall down dead. But when they had waited a long time and saw that he suffered no harm at all, they changed their minds and declared that the man was a god. Now, in the neighborhood of the beach were lands belonging to the chief of the island, a man named Publius, who received us and hosted us for 3 days. His father, as it happened, was lying sick with fever and dysentery, so Paul visited him and prayed and placed his hand on him and healed him. As word of this healing spread, the rest of those who were sick on the island came and were cured as well. They brought us many gifts, and when we were able to sail again, they carried on board everything that we needed. And so it was. After 3 months, we put to sea in a ship which had wintered in the island, another ship of Alexandria, which bore for its figurehead the twin brothers. We anchored again in Syracuse, where we stayed for 3 days. From there, we made a circuit, arrived at Rhegium, and after a day's wait, caught a south wind that carried us by the second day to Puteoli. In Puteoli, we found believers who invited us to stay with them for 7 days. We walked the final miles of our journey. Hearing of our approach, some believers rushed west from the city and met us at the end of the day, just as we came to the corner of 3 taverns, near the Forum of Appius. 2 groups stood in the dusk, while hushed gazing at one another. Among the Romans, a woman burst into tears, and then I saw that the face of Paul had begun to shine white silver, like a round and ravaged moon. "Priscilla, Priscilla," he was whispering. The sobbing woman broke from the Romans and ran to him and threw her arms around his chest and spilled her tears on his shoulders. Paul encircled her with his own arms. "You, my little Priscilla," he whispered, and then he too gave himself over to a noisy rain of tears. And so we came to Rome.